I thank all of the panelists. We tried to get abortion providers to come in and tell their stories, some of whom have experienced violence, but they were afraid to come in. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. For years, right-wing lawmakers across the country have been pushing so-called trigger bans that are designed to ban abortion immediately if Roe fell. Now that the Supreme Court has thrown out the constitutional right to abortion in 16 states have banned or nearly banned abortions, and many more will follow. And we have a map here that shows where abortion is banned, will soon be banned, or is being seriously considered. Almost half of the states. These bans are stripping away the rights for millions of Americans across our country. Representative Shannon, I understand that any day now Georgia may implement a 6-week ban on abortion. What would the impact be on the people you represent?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. As I mentioned in my testimony, yes, most of Georgia does not have the resources that the Atlanta metro area has, and Georgia ranks high consistently for maternal mortality deaths. And so if abortion were outlawed, simply put, we would be outlawing access to care. Which is something that would only exacerbate maternal mortality. So this would be a tremendous issue for the majority of the state. I've mentioned before how low our wages are in the state, and many places have really become unaffordable. And so this would be a tremendous burden and would amount to structural violence for many communities around the state.
Thank you. Michigan has a law in the books from nearly a century ago that would ban abortion immediately. This law has been put on hold by a Michigan court while it is litigated. Senator McMorrow, what does this uncertainty mean to the people in Michigan who need abortions and reproductive health care right now? And what are you worried about for the future?
Madam Chair, the implications are devastating. So as you mentioned, this law was written nearly a century ago, but the original version was written in 1847. And it provides no exception for rape or incest or age. It is vague enough to potentially include medication abortion and even contraception. It is dire. Right now, there is a preliminary injunction, meaning that abortion is still legal, but our Republican colleagues are spending almost $1 million of taxpayer dollars to challenge that injunction, to force the 1931 law into effect immediately, arguing that such legislation should be decided in the legislature, when in fact my Democratic colleagues and I have not only introduced bills to repeal the 1931 law, but to replace it with the Reproductive Health Act, which would codify abortion access and reproductive rights, and the legislature refuses to take those bills up. Michigan is currently one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. It is quite literally minority rule at the moment. And you need to look no further than an effort led by citizens here to forward a petition initiative to amend our state constitution, an initiative that requires 425,000 signatures to get on the November ballot. The organization led by Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, and Michigan Voices, which is a coalition of women of color, collected more than 800,000 signatures. That is about 1 in 10 registered voters in the state of Michigan physically found a petition, signed it to get it on the ballot. They turned in the highest number of petition signatures of any petition initiative in state history. The people are speaking, they are speaking very loudly because they know how devastating this 1931 law will be if and when it goes into effect.
Thank you. Professor Goodwin, we know that Black women face dramatically higher rates of maternal mortality than white women. In my own city, it's even higher than the national average, unfortunately. And it's unacceptable that despite having the highest maternal mortality rate among our peer countries, we're now forcing people to remain pregnant against their will. What does the Dobbs decision mean for those who will be forced to remain pregnant, and particularly for Black women to be forced against their will to remain pregnant?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for that question. This is no hyperbole, but to say that it is essentially a death sentence, given the data that we already know, given what the Supreme Court already knows and has expressed in 2016, that a woman is 14 times more likely to die by carrying a pregnancy to term than having an abortion. That statistic only magnifies in the states like Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, the deadliest places in all of the industrialized world to be pregnant. This is also data that comes from those very states, their departments of health. So it's not information that's made up from some left-wing radical organization. This is data that's produced in those very red states that show these alarming rates of death. And essentially, it is a death sentence for those women and also the girls affected. It means we have free states and non-free states like we did during the American period of slavery.
Thank you. The Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade takes us backwards. It is dangerous, as we just heard, and flat wrong. Democrats are dedicated and determined to do everything we can to reverse this, and I now yield back. As previously stated at the beginning of the hearing, Professor Goodwin has a hard stop at 11. Professor Goodwin, thank you very much for joining us today for your testimony, and you're excused. Thank you.